1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. Book 1, Chapter 14. Tango. Things that most readers have never seen before. Komatsu and Tango had arranged to meet in the usual place, the cafe near Shinjuku Station. Komatsu arrived 20 minutes late, as always. Komatsu never came on time, and Tango was never late. This was standard practice for them. Komatsu was carrying his leather briefcase and wearing his usual tweed jacket over a navy blue polo shirt. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Komatsu said, but he didn't seem at all sorry. He appeared to be in an especially good mood, his smile like a crescent moon at dawn. Tango merely nodded without answering. Komatsu took the chair across from him and said, "Sorry to hurry you. I'm sure it was tough." "I don't mean to exaggerate, but I didn't know whether I was alive or dead these past 10 days, Tango said. "You did great, though. You got permission from fuka-eri's guardian, and you finished rewriting the story. It's an amazing accomplishment for somebody who lives in his own little world. Now I see you in a whole new light." Tango ignored Komatsu's praise. "Did you read the report thing I wrote on fuka-eri's background? The long one?" "I sure did. Of course. Every word. Thanks for writing it. She's got a complicated history. It could be a part of a roman fleuve. But what really surprised me was to learn that Professor Ebisuno is her guardian. What a small world. Did he say anything about me?" "About you?" "Yes, did the professor say anything about me?" "No, nothing special." "That's strange," Komatsu said, evidently quite puzzled by this. "Professor Ebisuno and I once worked together. I used to go to his university office to pick up his manuscripts. It was a really long time ago, of course, when I was just getting started as an editor." "Maybe he forgot, if it was such a long time ago. He asked me to tell him about you, what sort of person you are." "No way," Komatsu said with a frown and a shake of the head. "That's impossible. He never forgets a thing. His memory's so good it's almost frightening. He and I talked about all kinds of stuff. I'm sure he remembers. Anyway, he's not an easy guy to deal with, and according to your report, the situation surrounding fuka-eri is not going to be easy to deal with either." "That's putting it mildly. It's like we're holding a time bomb. Fuka-eri is in no way ordinary. She's not just another pretty 17-year-old. If the novella makes a big splash, the media are going to pounce on this and reveal all kinds of tasty facts. It'll be terrible." "True, it could be a real Pandora's box," Komatsu said, but he was still smiling. "So should we cancel the plan?" "Cancel the plan?" "Yes, it'll be too big a deal and too dangerous. Let's put the original manuscript back in the pile." "It's not that easy, I'm afraid. Your Air Crystallis rewrite has already gone out to the printers. They're making the galleys. As soon as it's printed, it'll go to the editor-in-chief and the head of publications and the 4 members of the selection committee. It's too late to say, 'Excuse me, that was a mistake. Please give it back and pretend you never saw it.'" Tango sighed. "What's done is done. We can't turn the clock back," Komatsu said. He put a Marlboro between his lips, narrowed his eyes, and lit the cigarette with the cafe's matches. "I'll think about what to do next. You don't have to think about anything, Tango. Even if Air Crystallis takes the prize, we'll keep fuka-eri under wraps. She'll be the enigmatic girl writer who doesn't want to appear in public. I can pull it off. As the editor in charge of the story, I'll be her spokesman. Don't worry, I got it all figured out. I don't doubt your abilities, but fuka-eri is no ordinary girl. She's not the type to shut up and do as she's told. If she makes up her mind to do something, she'll do it. She doesn't hear what she doesn't want to hear. That's how she's made. It's not going to be as easy as you seem to think. Komatsu kept silent and went on turning over the matchbox in his hand. Then he said, "In any case, Tengo, we've come this far. All we can do now is make up our minds to keep going. First of all, your rewrite of Air Crystallis is marvelous, really wonderful, far exceeding my expectations. It's almost perfect. I have no doubt that it's going to take the new writer's prize and cause a big sensation. It's too late now for us to bury it. If you ask me, burying a work like that would be a crime. And as I said before, things are moving full speed ahead." "A crime?" Tengo explained, looking straight at Komatsu. "Well, take these words for example," Komatsu said. "Every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and pursuit, is thought to aim at some good, and for this reason the good has rightly been declared to be that at which all things aim." "What is that?" "Aristotle. Nicomachean Ethics. Have you ever read Aristotle?" "Almost nothing." "You ought to. I'm sure you'd like it. Whenever I run out of things to read, I read Greek philosophy. I never get tired of the stuff. There's always something new to learn." "So, what's the point of that quotation?" "The conclusion of things is the good. The good is, in other words, the conclusion at which all things arrive. Let's leave doubt for tomorrow," Komatsu said. "That is the point." "What does Aristotle have to say about the Holocaust?" Komatsu's crescent moon smile further deepened. "Here, Aristotle is mainly talking about things like art and scholarship and crafts." Tengo had far more than a passing acquaintance with Komatsu. He knew the man's public face, and he had seen his private face as well. Komatsu appeared to be a lone wolf in the literary industry, who had always survived by doing as he pleased. Most people were taken in by that image, but if you observed him closely, taking into account the full context of his actions, you could tell that his moves were highly calculated. He was like a player of chess or shogi who could see several moves ahead. It was true that he liked to plot outlandish schemes, but he was also careful to draw a line beyond which he would not stray. He was, if anything, a high-strung man whose more outrageous gestures were mostly for show. Komatsu was careful to protect himself with various kinds of insurance. For example, he wrote a literary column once a week in the evening edition of a major newspaper. In it, he would shower writers with praise or blame. The blame was always expressed in highly acerbic prose, which was a specialty of his. The column appeared under a made-up name, but everyone in the industry knew who was writing it. No one liked being criticized in the newspaper, of course, so writers tried their best not to ruffle his feathers. When asked by him to write something, they avoided turning him down whenever possible. Otherwise, there was no telling what might be said about them in the column. Tengo was not fond of Komatsu's more calculating side. the way he displayed contempt for the literary world while exploiting its system to his best advantage. Komatsu possessed outstanding editorial instincts, and he had been enormously helpful to Tengo. His advice on the writing of fiction was almost always valuable, but Tengo was careful to keep a certain distance between them. He was determined not to draw too close to Komatsu, and then have the ladder pulled out from under him for overstepping certain boundaries. In that sense, Tengo too was a cautious individual. As I said a minute ago, your rewrite of Air Crystallis is close to perfect. A great job, Komatsu continued. There's just one part, really just one, that I'd like to have you redo, if possible. Not now, of course. It's fine at the new writer level, but after the committee picks it to win the prize and just before the magazine prints it, at that stage I'd like you to fix it. What part? Tengo asked. When the little people finish making the Air Crystallis, there are 2 moons. The girl looks up to find 2 moons in the sky. Remember that part? Of course, I remember it. In my opinion, you haven't written enough about the 2 moons. I'd like you to give it more concrete detail. That's my only request. It is a little terse, maybe. I just didn't want to overdo it with detail and destroy the flow of fuka-eri's original. Komatsu raised the hand that had a cigarette tucked between the fingers. Think of it this way, Tengo. Your readers have seen the sky with 1 moon in it any number of times, right? But I doubt they've seen a sky with 2 moons in it side by side. When you introduce things that most readers have never seen before into a piece of fiction, you have to describe them with as much precision and in as much detail as possible. What you can eliminate from fiction is the description of things that most readers have seen. I get it, Tengo said. Komatsu's request made a lot of sense. I'll fill out that part when the 2 moons appear. Good. Then it will be perfect, Komatsu said. He crushed out his cigarette. I'm always glad to have you praise my work, Tengo said, but it's not so simple for me this time. You have suddenly matured, Komatsu said slowly, as if pausing for emphasis. You have matured both as a manipulator of language and as an author. It should be simple enough for you to be glad about that. I'm sure rewriting Air Crystallis taught you a lot about the writing of fiction. It should be a big help the next time you write your own work. If there is a next time, Tengo said. A big grin crossed Komatsu's face. Don't worry. You did your job. Now it's my turn. You can go back to the bench and take it easy. Just watch the game unfold. The waitress arrived and poured cold water into their glasses. Tengo drank half of his before realizing that he had absolutely no desire for water. He asked Komatsu, Was it Aristotle who said the human soul is composed of reason, will, and desire? No. That was Plato. Aristotle and Plato were as different as Mel Torme and Bing Crosby. In any case, things were a lot simpler in the old days, Komatsu said. Wouldn't it be fun to imagine reason, will, and desire engaged in a fierce debate around a table? I've got a pretty good idea who would lose that one. What I like about you, Komatsu said, raising an index finger, is your sense of humor. This is not humor, Tengo thought, but he kept it to himself. After leaving Komatsu, Tengo walked to Kinokuniya and bought several books. and started reading them over a beer in a nearby bar. This was the sort of moment in which he should have been able to relax most completely. On this particular night, though, he could not seem to concentrate on his books. The recurring image of his mother floated vaguely before his eyes and would not go away. She had lowered the straps of her white slip from her shoulders, revealing her well-shaped breasts, and was letting a man suck on them. The man was not his father. He was larger and more youthful and had better features. The infant Tango was asleep in his crib, eyes closed, his breathing regular. A look of ecstasy suffused his mother's face while the man sucked on her breasts, a look very much like his older girlfriend's when she was having an orgasm. Once, out of curiosity, Tango had asked his girlfriend to try wearing a white slip for him. "Glad to," she replied with a smile. "I'll wear one next time, if you like that. Do you have any other requests? I'll do anything you want. Just ask. Don't be embarrassed." "Can you wear a white blouse too? A very simple one." She showed up the following week wearing a white blouse over a white slip. He took her blouse off, lowered the shoulder straps of the slip, and sucked on her breasts. He adopted the same position and angle as the man in his vision, and when he did this, he felt a slight dizziness. His mind misted over, and he lost track of the order of things. In his lower body, there was a heavy sensation that rapidly swelled, and no sooner was he aware of this than he shuddered with a violent ejaculation. "Tango, what's wrong? Did you come already?" she asked, astounded. He himself was not sure what had just happened, but then he realized that he had gotten semen on the lower part of her slip. "I'm sorry," he said. "I wasn't planning to do that." "Don't apologize," she said, cheerily. "I can rinse it right off. It's just the usual stuff. I'm glad it's not soy sauce or red wine." She took the slip off, scrubbed the semen-smeared parts at the bathroom sink, and hung it over the shower rod to dry. "Was that too strong?" she asked with a gentle smile, rubbing Tango's belly with the palm of her hand. "You like white slips, huh, Tango?" "Not exactly," Tango said, but he could not explain to her his real reason for having made the request. "Just let Big Sister know anytime you've got a fantasy you want to play out, honey. I'll go along with anything. I just love fantasies. Everybody needs some kind of fantasy to go on living, don't you think? You want me to wear a white slip next time too?" Tango shook his head. "No thanks. Once was enough." Tango often wondered if the man sucking on his mother's breasts in his vision might be his biological father. This was because Tango in no way resembled the man who was supposed to be his father, the stellar NHK Collections agent. Tango was a tall, strapping man with a broad forehead, narrow nose, and tightly bald ears. His father was short and squat and utterly unimpressive. He had a narrow forehead, flat nose, and pointed ears like a horse's. Virtually every facial feature of his contrasted with Tango's. Where Tango had a generally relaxed and generous look, his father appeared nervous and tight-fisted. Comparing the two of them, people often openly remarked that they did not look like father and son. Still, it was not their different facial features that made it difficult for Tango to identify with his father. Rather, it was their psychological makeup and tendencies. His father showed no sign at all of what might be called intellectual curiosity. True, his father had not had a decent education. Having been born in poverty, he had not had the opportunity to establish himself an orderly intellectual system. Tango felt a degree of pity regarding his father's circumstances, but still a basic desire to obtain knowledge at a universal level, which Tango assumed to be a more or less natural urge in people, was lacking in the man. There was a certain practical wisdom at work in him that enabled him to survive, but Tango could discover no hint of a willingness in his father to raise himself up, to deepen himself, to view a wider, larger world. But Tango's father never seemed to suffer discomfort from the narrowness and the stagnant air of his cramped little world. Tango never once saw him pick up a book at home. They never had newspapers. Watching the regular NHK news broadcasts was enough, he would say. He had absolutely no interest in music or movies, and he never took a trip. The only thing that seemed to interest him was his assigned collection route. He would make a map of the area, mark it with colored pens, and examine it whenever he had a spare moment, the way a biologist classifies chromosomes. By contrast, Tango was regarded as a math prodigy from early childhood. His grades in arithmetic were always outstanding. He could solve high school math problems by the time he was in the 3rd grade. He won high marks in other sciences as well, without any apparent effort. And whenever he had a spare moment, he would devour books. Hugely curious about everything, he would absorb knowledge from a broad range of fields with all the efficiency of a power shovel scooping earth. Whenever he looked at his father, he found it inconceivable that half of the genes that made his existence possible could come from this narrow, uneducated man. My real father must be somewhere else. This was the conclusion that Tango reached in boyhood. Like the unfortunate children in a Dickens novel, Tango must have been led by strange circumstances to be raised by this man. Such a possibility was both a nightmare and a great hope. He became obsessed with Dickens after reading Oliver Twist, plowing through every Dickens volume in the library. As he traveled through the world of the stories, he steeped himself in reimagined versions of his own life. The reimaginings, or obsessive fantasies, in his head grew even longer and more complex. They followed a single pattern, but with infinite variations. In all of them, Tango would tell himself that this was not the place where he belonged. He had been mistakenly locked in a cage. Someday, his real parents, guided by sheer good fortune, would find him. They would rescue him from this cramped and ugly cage and bring him back where he belonged. Then he would have the most beautiful, peaceful, and free Sundays imaginable. Tango's father exulted over the boy's outstanding schoolwork. He prided himself on Tango's excellent grades and boasted of them to people in the neighborhood. At the time, however, he showed a great displeasure regarding Tango's brightness and talent. Often when Tengo was at his desk studying, his father would interrupt him, seemingly on purpose. He would order the boy to do chores or nag Tengo about his supposedly offensive behavior. The content of his father's nagging was always the same. He was running himself ragged every day, covering huge distances and sometimes enduring people's curses as a collections agent, while Tengo did nothing but take it easy all the time, living in comfort. They had me working my tail off around the house when I was your age, and my father and older brother would beat me black and blue for anything at all. They never gave me enough food and treated me like an animal. I don't want you thinking you're so special just because you got a few good grades. His father would go on like this, endlessly. This man may be envious of me, Tengo began to think after a certain point. He's jealous, either of me as a person or the life I'm leading. But does a father really feel jealous toward his own son? As a child, Tengo did not judge his father, but he could not help feeling a pathetic kind of meanness that emanated from his father's words and deeds. And this he found almost physically unbearable. Often he felt that this man was not only envious of him, but that he actually hated something in his son. It was not that his father hated Tengo as a person, but rather he hated something inside Tengo, something that he could not forgive. Mathematics gave Tengo an effective means of retreat. By fleeing into a world of numerical expression, he was able to escape from a troublesome cage of reality. As a little boy, he noticed that he could easily move into a mathematical world with the flick of a switch in his head. He remained free as long as he actively explored that realm of infinite consistency. He walked down the gigantic building's twisted corridor, opening one numbered door after another. Each time a new spectacle opened up before him. The ugly traces of the real world would dissipate and then simply disappear. The world governed by numerical expression was, for him, a legitimate and always safe hiding place. As long as he stayed in that world, he could forget or ignore the rules and burdens forced upon him by the real world. Where mathematics was a magnificent imaginary building, the world of story as represented by Dickens was like a deep magical forest for Tengo. When mathematics stretched infinitely upward toward the heavens, the forest spread out beneath his gaze in silence, its dark, sturdy roots stretching deep into the earth. In the forest, there were no maps, no numbered doorways. In elementary and middle school, Tengo was utterly absorbed by the world of mathematics. Its clarity and absolute freedom enthralled him, and he also needed them to survive. Once he entered adolescence, however, he began to feel increasingly that this might not be enough. There was no problem as long as he was visiting the world of math, but whenever he returned to the real world, as return he must, he found himself in the same miserable cage. Nothing had improved. Rather, his shackles felt even heavier. So then, what good was mathematics? Wasn't it just a temporary means of escape that made his real-life situation even worse? As his doubts increased, Tengo began deliberately to put some distance between himself and the world of mathematics, and instead the forest of story began to exert a stronger pull on his heart. Of course, reading novels was just another form of escape. As soon as he closed their pages, he had to come back to the real world. But at some point, Tango noticed that returning to reality from the world of a novel was not as devastating a blow as returning from the world of mathematics. Why should that have been? After much deep thought, he reached a conclusion. No matter how clear the relationships of things might become in the forest of story, there was never a clear-cut solution. That was how it differed from math. The role of a story was, in the broadest terms, to transpose a single problem into another form. Depending on the nature and direction of the problem, a solution could be suggested in the narrative. Tango would return to the real world with that suggestion in hand. It was like a piece of paper bearing the indecipherable text of a magic spell. At times, it lacked coherence and served no immediate practical purpose, but it would contain a possibility. Someday he might be able to decipher the spell. That possibility would gently warm his heart from within. The older he became, the more Tango was drawn to this kind of narrative suggestion. Mathematics was a great joy for him even now as an adult. When he was teaching students at the cram school, the same joy he had felt as a child would come welling up naturally. To share the joy of that conceptual freedom with someone was a wonderful thing. But Tango was no longer able to lose himself so unreservedly in a world of numerical expression. For he knew that no amount of searching in that world would give him the solution he was really looking for. When he was in the 5th grade, after much careful thinking, Tango declared that he wanted to stop making the rounds with his father on Sundays to collect the NHK subscription fees. He told his father that he wanted to use the time for studying and reading books and playing with other kids. Just as his father had his own work, he had things that he had to do. He wanted to live a normal life like everybody else. Tango said what he needed to say, concisely and coherently. His father, of course, blew up. He didn't give a damn what other families did, he said. It had nothing to do with them. We have our own way of doing things, and don't you dare talk to me about a normal life. Mr. Know-it-all, what do you know about normal life? Tango did not try to argue with him. He merely stared back in silence, knowing that nothing he said would get through to his father. If that was what Tango wanted, his father continued, that was what he would get. But if he couldn't listen to his father couldn't go on feeding him anymore. Tango should get the hell out. Tango did as he was told. He packed a bag and left home. He had made up his mind. No matter how angry his father got, no matter how much he screamed and shouted, Tango was not going to be afraid, even if his father raised a hand to him, which he did not do. Now that Tango had been given permission to leave his cage, he was more relieved than anything else. But still, there was no way a 10-year-old boy could live on his own. When class was dismissed at the end of the day, he confessed his predicament to his teacher and said he had no place to spend the night. He also explained to her what an emotional burden it had been for him to make the rounds with his father on Sundays collecting NHK subscription fees. The teacher was a single woman in her mid-30s. She was far from beautiful, and she wore thick, ugly glasses. but she was a fair-minded, warm-hearted person. A small woman, she was normally quiet and mild-mannered, but she could be surprisingly quick-tempered. Once she let her anger out, she became a different person, and no one could stop her. The difference shocked people. Tango, however, was fond of her, and her temper tantrums never frightened him. She heard Tango out with understanding and sympathy, and she brought him home to spend the night in her house. She spread a blanket on the sofa and had him sleep there. She made him breakfast in the morning. That evening, she took him to his father's place for a long talk. Tango was told to leave the room, so he was not sure what they said to each other, but finally his father had to sheathe his sword. However extreme his anger might be, he could not leave a 10-year-old boy to wander the streets alone. The duty of a parent to support his child was a matter of law. As a result of the teacher's talk with his father, Tango was free to spend Sundays as he pleased. He was required to devote the morning to housework, but he could do anything he wanted after that. This was the first tangible right that Tango had ever won from his father. His father was too angry to talk to Tango for a while, but this was of no great concern to the boy. He had won something far more important than that. He had taken his first step toward freedom and independence. Tango did not see his 5th grade teacher for a long time after he left elementary school. He probably could have seen her if he had attended the occasional class reunion to which he was invited, but he had no intentions of showing his face at such gatherings. He had virtually no happy memories from that school. He did, however, think of his teacher now and then and recall what she had done for him. The next time he saw her, Tango was in his 2nd year of high school. He belonged to the judo club, but he had injured his calf at the time and was forced to take a 2-month break from his judo matches. Instead, he was recruited to be a temporary percussionist in the school's brass band. The band was only days away from a competition, but one of their 2 percussionists suddenly transferred to another school, and the other one came down with a bad case of influenza. All they needed was a human being who could hold 2 sticks, the music teacher said, pleading with Tango to help them out of their predicament since his injury had left him with time to kill. There would be several meals in it for Tango, and the teacher promised to go easy on his grade if he would join the rehearsals. Tango had never performed on a percussion instrument, nor had any interest in doing so. But once he actually tried playing, he was amazed to find that it was perfectly suited to the way his mind worked. He felt a natural joy in dividing time into small fragments, reassembling them and transforming them into an effective row of tones. All of the sounds mentally appeared to him in the form of a diagram. He proceeded to grasp the system of one percussion instrument after another, the way a sponge soaks up water. His music teacher introduced him to a symphony orchestra's percussionist, from whom he learned the techniques of the timpani. He mastered its general structure and performance technique with only a few hours' lessons. And because the score resembled numerical expression, learning how to read it was no great challenge for him. The music teacher was delighted to discover Tango's outstanding musical talent. "You seem to have a natural sense for complex rhythms and a marvelous ear for music," he said. "If you continue to study with professionals, you could become one yourself." The timpani was a difficult instrument, but it was deep and compelling in its own special way. Its combination of sounds hinting at infinite possibilities. Tango and his classmates were rehearsing several passages excerpted from Janacek's Sinfonietta as arranged for wind instruments. They were to perform it as their free choice piece in a competition for high school brass bands. Janacek's Sinfonietta was a difficult piece for high school musicians, and the timpani figured prominently in the opening fanfare. The music teacher, who doubled as the band leader, had chosen Sinfonietta on the assumption that he had two outstanding percussionists to work with, and when he suddenly lost them, he was at his wit's end. Obviously then, Tango had a major role to fill, but he felt no pressure and wholeheartedly enjoyed the performance. The band's performance was flawless, good enough for a top prize, if not the championship, and when it was over, Tango's old 5th grade teacher came over to congratulate him on his fine playing. "I knew it was you right away, Tango," she said. He recognized this small woman but couldn't recall her name. "The timpani sounded so good. I looked to see who could be playing it, and it was you, of all people. You're a lot bigger than you used to be, but I recognized your face immediately. When did you start playing?" Tango gave her a quick summary of the events that had led up to this performance, which made her all the more impressed. "You're such a talented boy, and in so many ways." "Judo is a lot easier for me," Tango said, smiling. "So, how's your father?" she asked. "He's fine," Tango responded automatically, though he didn't know and didn't want to know how his father was doing. By then, Tango was living in a dormitory and hadn't spoken to his father in a very long time. "Why are you here?" he asked the teacher. "My niece plays clarinet in another high school's band. She wanted me to hear her play a solo. Are you going to keep up with your music?" "I'll go back to judo when my leg gets better. Judo keeps me fed. My school supports judo in a big way. They cover my room and board. The band can't do that." "I guess you're trying not to depend on your father." "Well, you know what he's like," Tango said. She smiled at him. "It's too bad, though, with all your talents." Tango looked down at the small woman and remembered the night she put him up at her place. He pictured the plain and practical, but neat and tidy little apartment in which she lived. The lace curtains and potted plants, the ironing board and open book, the small pink dress hanging on the wall, the smell of the sofa where he slept, and now here she stood before him, he realized, fidgeting like a young girl. He realized, too, that he was no longer a powerless 10-year-old boy, but a strapping 17-year-old, broad-chested, with a stubble to shave and a sex drive in full bloom. He felt strangely calm in the presence of this older woman. "I'm glad I ran into you," she said. "I am too," Tango replied. He really was glad, but he still couldn't remember her name. End of chapter.